all our performance. What an incredible show, and what a way to open the conference. Good morning, everyone. I'm Anita Gorni-Molody, Portfolio Director at DCD. It's fantastic to see you all here, and we are delighted to be back in Bali. This year marks a special milestone for us. It's the third DCD Connect APAC conference, our biggest event to date. With over 2,000 registered delegates, over 150 speakers, and over 80 suppliers from across the digital infrastructure ecosystem. Across the next 2 days, we have 5 tracks of content for you to explore. The main stage, the talk stage, the showcase stage, investment forum, and leadership summit. Together, these offer a rich program of content, insight, and knowledge sharing, covering industry trends, innovative technologies, investment strategies, and leadership challenges shaping this industry across the region. But of course, DCD Connect APAC, it's not only about sessions, it's about the connections made in between them. From lunches, VIP drinks, coffee, breaks, the beach party, after party drinks, and VIP cocktails, there will be plenty of opportunities to make new connections, foster your current relationships, and build new contacts over the next 2 days. And it is my pleasure to say thank you to all our sponsors and exhibitors for their support, because without them, this event would not be happening. So please make sure you visit their stands and find out about the solutions they are bringing to the market. And now, I would like to introduce the first session, the welcome address from the ministers. Mr. Septian Haryo-Seto, Executive Secretary and member at the National Economic Council of the Republic of Indonesia, followed by Mr. Denny Setavian, Director of Strategy and Policy of Digital Infrastructure at the Ministry of Communication and Digital Affairs. Before we commence, I would like to ask everyone to stand up to listen to the Indonesia's national anthem. Mario Septian Seto to the stage.
Actually, we can accelerate the adoption of the digital connectivity into our day-to-day life. During the COVID, we find out that 37% of the new consumers joining the digital economy. 93% of the new consumer in the digital economy continue actually to utilize digital connectivity post-COVID-19. So this is actually something that we've seen should probably in normal situation will take 5, 7, 8 years. It's happening for less than 2 years in COVID. So I think this is very important. For Indonesia, digital connectivity matters because I think this is required for us to grow faster. If we just using a common strategy, building infrastructure, exporting natural resources, it will not bring our economy into 6, 7, 8% growth to escape from the middle income trap. But what is important is how we can utilize digital connectivity to deliver better government service to business community, to citizen, and inside the government itself. This is actually our first testing of a massive digital adoption is during the COVID. During the COVID, we create one apps that we call it Peduli Lindungi, Care and Protect. So these apps will be used for every citizen to register their vaccine and to be used if they want to enter shopping mall, if they want to enter public infrastructure, if they want to go by plane, if they want to go by train. So they have to use these apps to show that they are free from COVID-19. During 2 years we implement this system, more than 106 million users is actually using this Peduli Lindungi. About 2.16 billion QR code check-ins and 353 million vaccine is registered in this system. So this system features QR check-in, digital vaccination, daily symptom screening, national data integration. So we are doing a testing how actually we can deal with this health issue, addressing the restriction in mobility using these apps. So during this journey from 2020 and 2023, 106 million users is being registered. Now we are moving this infrastructure actually into one of our backbone for the healthcare service in Indonesia. So the point for us is that using these apps actually demonstrate that Indonesia, we can do a massive digital adoption in our government services. So based on this experience, actually we design what we call it, this government digital transformation. There are 3 foundations that we are building inside the government today. The first one is the digital identity. This is ongoing now. I will tell you one application that we are now doing a testing. The second one is the digital payment. The third one is the data exchange. And to process all of this, we are using the big data and artificial intelligence. On where this is digital public infrastructure will apply, there are 5 pillars in the government services that actually we are using this DPI. The first one is for the social protection. This is very important. We, as a government, spend $50 billion every year for this kind of social protection and the government assistance. The key issue is how we can better target actually the poor people that eligible to receive this government assistance. How we can use all of this digital public infrastructure to profile the right poor people that eligible to get this government assistance. I will tell you more our testing about this one. The second one is the business licensing services. This is OSS. one of the testing that we are using is we are implementing AI to read documents for the government permit application. I can tell you one of the permit in Indonesia that is quite complex is the environmental permit. It consists of thousands of pages of document. Yeah. We are doing a test that AI can read all this document in less than 15 minutes. Yeah. So it will help the government bureaucrat to identify and assess the eligibility of this application and faster the time to approve the permit. So this is the second pillar. The third pillar is the digital procurement, what we call it the e-catalog. This is like the Amazon for the government procurement. So the government doesn't need to do tender and everything. If I'm bureaucrat and I want to buy something for the government office, I can just go to this website, doing a click, and then that's it. So it shortened the time limit in government procurement. Pillar number 4 is actually on the government revenue. The one that we are having a full implementation is Simbara. Simbara basically is a digital traceability system so that the government can actually trace every ton of coal, every ton of mineral from mining until the end buyer. Where the mineral or the coal coming from, whether they already pay the government royalty, government tax. So we can detect all of this in this digital system. The last one is the Inaku portal, what we call it the citizen portal. This is for the government services for all its citizen in the day-to-day life. I'll give you one example. This is actually what I mentioned to you earlier, how we use this digital infrastructure and connectivity to actually better target the poor people that eligible for this government assistance. So we are doing a test in Banyuwangi. This is not too far from Bali. This is the most eastern district in Jawa. We are doing a test to approximately 300,000 people. So basically we are register them into the digital ID. We are doing a biometrics. They are filling all the what we call it this national identity profile. Where do you live? How many children, family. So it's all registered in the system. So after the system is being registered, the next one is we are actually connecting the database. To the several government database for a land ownership, car ownership, electricity consumption, whether you are part of the government civil service or not. So that we can target, we can create the criteria if, for example, to be eligible to get the government assistance, for example, your income has to be lower than certain threshold and everything. So using this connectivity database, and then we connect also with the digital ID, we can create an algorithm to profile if, for example, we scan people, we can check if these people eligible for the government assistance or not. We are doing a test now in 42 districts in Indonesia for this system actually to be implemented. In Bali, I think in July, we are going to do a massive testing for the system to target and better profile for this government assistance program. It will cover about more than 10 people in this second stage of the testing. If this is successful, the idea is actually how the government can expand the programs into a nationwide, covering 288 million people. The second one that I mentioned to you earlier is the digital procurement system that is developed by the government. So this is like what I mentioned to you earlier, Amazon for a government procurement. So all the government supplier, there will be a selection, there will be a requirement for them to be included in the database. But once they are included in the database, like I mentioned to you earlier, if I want to buy something, I just go into this website and click the goods that I want. So there are many options. There are a lot of goods And then the one that is also important is we can involve more small, medium enterprise into the system, because many of them in the normal procurement process may not be eligible, may not be actually listed in a part of the government supplier because the bureaucracy process and everything. But once they include in the system, actually they can be part of the government procurement. So total now is about $74 billion government procurement realization using this website. 7 days total procurement process is down from 2 months. We are achieving about 20 to 30% budget efficiency. We are able to increase the local content. So I think this is something that we are using now for the government procurement. The last one is actually the one that we would like to show you is this natural resources traceability system. So basically, we create a system that connect all the government database from the Ministry of Mine, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Transport, so that we can track the production of the mining commodities in Indonesia, starting from the mine, going into the vessel until the end buyer. So the idea at the time is actually how we can reduce the leakage, how we can address the issue of the illegal activity in the system. Now coal is already included in the system. For coal, every year we export between 35 to 40 billion US dollar. Now the idea, what the president have given instruction is to put all other commodities such as nickel, gold, tin, and palm oil into the system. If you combine all of this will cover, the system will cover about 100 billion US dollar of the Indonesian export product. Probably around 40% of our total export. So with all of this government program, one thing that for sure Indonesia needs is actually the digital infrastructure. The data center is very important. I think my colleague, Pak Dani from the Ministry of Communication and Digital will later also explain to you the requirement for the government to use this data center. We are doing now what we call it the roadmap for how we can provide the digital infrastructure to support of all of this government initiative in this digital connectivity. So I think very welcome. The government is very welcome if you want to discuss further about what kind of opportunity that we can work together, especially to support this government program. I think I will stop there. Thank you and enjoy the conference.
Thank you very much to Mr. Septian Hario Seto for the presentation. And now please welcome to the stage Mr. Denny Setiawan, Director of Strategy and Policy of Digital Infrastructure at the Ministry of Communication and Digital Affairs.
Good morning. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to Bali and distinguished guests, Mr. Seto. It is my pleasure to present the Ministry of ComDigi to present you on this very important event on DCD Connect APAC 2026. So, digital infrastructure, if we can assume analogy as the part of circular blood system, data center is the heart of digital infrastructure. The other component is subsea cable, fibers as the backbone, as aorta, and also the access, FTTH, satellite, and so on and so forth. That's my division, my Director General is responsible of. So, the policy framework for sustainable growth for digital infrastructure is regulatory certainty, the investment ecosystem, and sustainable, resilient, and trusted digital environment. This is what we would like to explore in the presentation. So this is to reiterate the previous speaker. We have 129 million internet users. 1/3 of this region, Southeast Asian. And we have 98, almost 99% 4G coverage population. And at the end, I will show you that we will release the 5G spectrum, expect to be released soon. The fiber optic connectivity, 80% of sub-district. We have almost 70,000 sub-district in Indonesia. And so I think there's the three keywords: connected, growing, and protected. So this is the number, this the growth that we expect within the 5 years. This is our national midterm development plan that stipulated our document or planning. The target of sub-district from 70% to become 90% of sub-district. So you can imagine almost 6,500 sub-district. And mobile population, because I think we have almost 100, but the remaining 2% is challenging. We might thinking about the satellite, maybe we might think of the NTN, might be the solution. And for data center, this is very interesting. My department targeted to increase almost 10 times fold within 5 years. So we thankfully, with the AI and with you all here, that this target will be fulfilled. This is three I think, component: fiber optics, mobile broadband, 4G, 5G, and data center. And my minister, the Honorable Mr. Habib, would like this country to become one of the foremost AI country in this region, which is very challenging, to be honest with you. So this planning is stipulated and to become our reference to our development and the policy on the investment by both the government and also the public, the industry. So this is our mobile broadband roadmap. Yeah, we will launch 5G. We used to have less spectrum, but we now in the process of the auction 702.6 gigahertz. We expect that before our Independence Day, we live on the 5G in this country with this two frequency. On fixed broadband and fiberization, we expect that we can have fiberized up until the sub-district to match demand of the current government project of the health, of like what Mr. Seta mentioned, some project of the healthcare, schools, yeah, and then digitalization of public service until sub-district, even to the village. And the third one is submarine cable and data center. Indonesia is country of 17,000 islands. Without submarine cable is very challenging. Yeah. So this is one topic would like to pinpoint. Our challenge as these island countries, which we only have maybe two dependence to one single source. We in the interest hub with two dependent to Singapore. We'd like to have more, and we do have already Manado in North Sulawesi as a direct hub, direct subsea cable to Guam, to US from Jakarta, thanks to one of the hyperscaler. And a few months ago, years ago, I think we discussed with Australian government how to link between Kupang and Darwin. I know Darwin is probably will be the point of the region, and we would like to have this southern of Indonesia, maybe Bali, I don't know, part of the eastern part, maybe others. So it's not limited to Kupang, but we need diversity, not only dependence on one particular point. So that's why we now develop the roadmap. And we do have a Palaparing project, which is to link our provincial 37 provincial in the country, and we expect to extend that. At least one major island has redundancy, has two cable landing station yeah, and we would like to have more cable landing, international landing station. Currently only 4, Batam, Manado, and Jayapura, and Kupang, but probably Jakarta is one, maybe Surabaya. And we would like to align with data center. That's what we're doing, and I think to provide a reliable connection, increase capacity, and also the latency. So when we discuss about the data center, we also together we develop the roadmap of subsea cable and fiberization, land fiberization. We try to have more integrated park as this concept. We do it successfully in Batam, Nongsa, but it's not enough. Yeah, we'd like to create more. That's why I think we now develop the roadmap. We invite the collaboration among 20 ministries, yeah, between fisheries, between the marine and so on and so forth, and also energy. We also discuss with our PLN, the electricity company, how to align between the roadmap or digital and between the energy, particularly the green energy. So what we expect that we have the integrated digital parks, as you said, international cable landing, fibers land, data center, and also green energy, and with the AI support. This is what we expect that this study would be completed in the end of this year. This is the three pinpoint. The output is international gateway. We want to become also data center hub, right? Reliable power ecosystem and cooling system. Indonesia compared with other countries, we have a lot of island, lot of waters. But of course, we need more efficient, yeah. And then also the green energy. We have a lot of natural resources. We discuss a lot with the PLN. We have also the Ministry of Resources, how to provide. But we understand, currently, because of data center now focused in Jakarta, we expect in our roadmap not only focused in Jakarta, Batam, Cikarang, Karawang, and Batam. Because at the end, we will get the point of the saturation. We need to also thinking about the environment, yeah, support of the water, support electricity for the people in those areas. So that's why we expect more diverse location. We do have a lot of location, and we do have the potential, population, yeah, particularly. Not only this region, maybe in Surabaya and maybe in Bali, for example, or the others. So this is just to inform you, I just met the PLN West Java yesterday, fortunately, and this is just a situation that the current hot areas like Cikarang, Bekasi, and is almost full. Cannot have a it can, but the PLN has need time to prepare. But we have yellow area, we have blue area. I will say you the areas that the PLN is provide. Okay, this is the situation, the short. But of course, in the mid and long term, we expect to have more. Indonesia is not only Java. It is West Java, the Karawang. Yeah, this is the hot area. But we do have Bogor, for example. Yeah. And then we have also the other areas. So this is, just would like to inform you the update about the fixed broadband. We try with our limitation to try to find some innovative way to enhance fiberization. So that's why we provide the licensing the BWA of the 5G, 1.4 GHz. But the main thing is that they have to open access and the fiberized tower. So this is try to have more fiberization with the industry. But of course, the government needs to step in. And One way is that we discuss with the PLN electricity company how to use their poles as the passive faster for fiberized. And this is my last slide, just to update you the mobile, because Indonesia has, and as I mentioned, 98% coverage, but also the user almost 300 more plus million subscribers of mobile, currently on mostly 4G. But we will release these two frequency, 700 megahertz, 2.6 gigahertz, which is we need very strong time. And in the process, we expect this will be launched before our Independence Day in August. So to conclude my remarks, I would like to encourage this participant. Let us build boldly, collaboratively, and ensure that digital future for Asia Pacific is not only more connected, but also more inclusive, resilient, and sustainable. With that, I conclude my remark. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
That's okay.
Taruh aja belum habis ini. Nah, taruh aja udah. Udah bisa taruh.
That's all right, no worries. Thank you, Sepchan Harya Seto and Denise Chawan, for your welcome address and for highlighting Indonesia's growing role in the global infrastructure ecosystem. And good morning, everyone. My name is Audrey Pasquale. I'm the conference producer for DCD Connect APAC, responsible for our program and speaker faculty. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the third edition of DCD Connect APAC. Thank you for traveling from across the Asia-Pacific region to join us over the next 2 days and for being part of our largest edition to date. I would also like to thank our advisory board, whose insights and guidance have helped shape the program you'll experience over the next 2 days. We encourage you to make the most out of your time here by joining the many sessions and networking opportunities throughout the program. And we hope you leave Bali not only with valuable new business connections, but also fresh insights and ideas that will help shape your strategies. Give us one moment while we reset the stage, and please stay with us for our opening major panel, Building the Next Generation of AI Infrastructure, What Will Define Success, sponsored by TBH. We will use headsets for this session, so please use the blue channel and turn them on. You have some on your seats, and there's some at the back as well. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to DCD APAC. I'm delighted to be moderating the opening session this morning. Major panel, building the next generation of AI infrastructure, what will define success. To start off with, obviously would like to introduce my panelists. So if I could start with you, Mayank, if you could just introduce yourself, that would be great.
Good to be here, Mayank. I run BDX data centers. We have running operations in 5 countries. Indonesia is home turf for us, our biggest deployment. Very pleased to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Duncan, SVP Stack Infrastructure. Very happy to be here and looking forward to having what I hope will be a good panel with everybody, and we'll share some insights around DC development.
Morning, everyone. My name's Rob Hammond. I'm a partner at TBH. We're a strategic and project advisory firm operating across APAC and the Middle East.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm Heather Laurie, Senior Director of Customer Success at AirTrunk. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for having me and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, everybody. Let's kick off just with a bit of scene setting here. At a high level, what are some of the key success criteria in the APAC market to be successful in the global AI infrastructure era? Maybe if I can start with you. Yeah, go for it, Tom.
Thank you. I would say the most critical factor is time to market. Essentially, from a customer perspective, the person that can deliver quickest with certainty and at scale is going to be most successful. So that means really working and structuring your land acquisition program to be able to deliver to those criteria, particularly around power and permitting in what is an ever-changing market, particularly in some jurisdictions in Southeast Asia.
Into that a little bit more shortly, but Rob, if you could give your perspective.
I'd agree with Tom exactly on that. It's all about speed and delivery certainty. We work with a lot of investors, we work with tenants, we work with developers and contractors, so we understand, I guess, all the moving parts, and the ones that are the most successful are the ones that are able to deliver on time, every time. They can scale their business up, they've got the reputation and reliability, but it's absolutely about power. There's no limit in terms of demand, as we're seeing at least for the next few years, and there's no limit in terms of the capital that's out there looking for a home as well. So if you've got a good delivery story, it's a very powerful, compelling proposition.
Yeah, and I think you know, the landscape has changed since we were last discussing around cloud. Like, I agree with everything you both said around power, delivery certainty, scale, but I think understanding the difference that AI has brought and how you can solve those challenges, but it's kind of compounded a little bit. So yes, we can go a little bit more remote now. We don't, you know, latency is not as much of a forefront as it was for, you know, cloud computing, but also the scale at which they want is much bigger and the time that they want is much faster. So it's you solve one problem, but you've also got a whole new load of challenges to try and overcome.
Mayank, from an operator perspective.
I think in addition to what everybody said, the critical thing is supply chain as well. And we've already seen disruptions happening across the region. The war isn't helping. So yeah, supply chain is one more thing that we need to sort of have a handle on.
Just picking up on some of the themes from those opening remarks, I think let's double click on power for a moment. Is power now the primary factor determining where data centers get built in the region? Is that, you know, ahead of land connectivity, and how is the region as a whole overcoming power constraints? Maybe if I can start with you, Heather.
Sure. Yeah, I think power is definitely a very critical part. There's still a lot of the key things stand true, so planning and permitting, but I do think that power at the scale is a bottleneck, and it's one of the things that, for example, if your site selection now, it's mostly power-led, so where you can go more remotely for AI workloads where latency is not as important, you can usually get access to more power and much more of it. But I think that as I mentioned, the scale of these projects, the volume of the projects, the speed at which they want them, the grid is still not keeping up with that pace. So power, is really important, and then also innovative ways to solve that time to market. So temporary power, bridging power, these are all things that are becoming super commonplace and have their own permitting challenges in some cases. And so, yeah, I do think that power is becoming, like, the conversation is purely around energy in some instances.
That was good timing. Rob, from your perspective, let's talk about the power challenge.
Yeah, absolutely agree with what Heather just said there. If you think about the scale of what we're building now, going from 50 megawatt, 100 megawatt a few years ago, it's now gigawatt. Who knows where the next 3 years is going to be. We can get more efficient from a water use perspective, but the power is the one thing that we can't limit. So certainly it's going to be the challenge for a lot of countries in APAC. And I guess noting that there's a lot of difference in the countries within Asia. Some have good infrastructure, some have good renewables, some are already at the limit and will struggle. And I think where you start to see challenges between, I guess, residential use and versus data centres, you're going to get pushback from government as well. And so that's something that I think, what we're seeing with the best developers, they're starting to look at, I guess, win-win ways of trying to find ways to fund this infrastructure, build new power infrastructure, be that generation or transmission. If they can do that, then I think that's a great way forward for this region to build infrastructure that's going to help from a digital perspective as well as power.
Yeah, I just sort of picking up on that theme, the social license to operate. We are seeing in the US particularly massive pushback from communities around power. It's either driving up my power bill or I don't have access to the power. So I think what the data center sector has to do in APAC is to get ahead of that conversation. And that means investing more in the power infrastructure, investing further upstream. That means building out your own infrastructure whereby you're going to be taking some capacity off that, but then there's other that's available for the community. As my colleagues up here have said, the other ways to look at generation, islanded schemes, build your own generation. The challenge around that is we're seeing in some jurisdictions, they're not set up for that. For example, gas cogen, where can you actually get gas there? What's the licensing and permitting about building a gas cogen station? In some countries, you're looking at 5 years to get permitted for a gas cogen plant. Well, that doesn't work. We're trying to solve for the fact that the grid can't provide the power for 5-6 years. So I think it requires a bit more on both sides looking at how you can develop that out. And the other way, I think, as well, is we're going to have to, as Heather intimated, we're going to have to move data centers from the traditional availability zones for cloud compute. We're going to have to go to the power. So I think we as an industry have to be more innovative in how we secure power and more mindful of the communities that we're serving.
Space, Heather and Tom. So, well, I'm not entirely kidding, right? So, a dreadful scenario would be that you pick up a power generation plant, you're bold enough, you go out and take $1 billion bet on setting up a power plant, and you see data centers are getting into space. But closer to terra firma, I think it is a very serious issue. Governments are struggling. We see governments struggling across the countries, and we've had sort of crazy some of the outcomes that we've seen in some of the countries in the region is, just a simple clamp down, and I'm not talking about Singapore. So the governments just clamped down, no more data centers, and forget about the ramifications. But in the immediate context, it's really hurtful. So yes, alternate power goal is still real. And there's this whole sort of thing about moving on to ESG. I appreciate and I respect that, but the point is that before you move to ESG, you need to have a business running. So I think a lot of countries we see are taking the initiative of sort of doubling down on coal generation across the region. Again, it's still not going to happen tomorrow. So is there a clear answer for tomorrow? I think it's going to be opportunistic. It's going to be finding the power and taking the data center there.
What I'm hearing a lot of from all of your comments is the need for cooperation in the region. So how do you see that playing a role in sort of overcoming this power constraint? Is it government, partnership that's important? Is it the whole ecosystem? Like, how does that play through in terms of the solution? Maybe if I can start with you, Rob.
I think that it is all about cooperation, and I guess what we're seeing in Malaysia at the moment is a win-win outcome where Singapore is constrained in terms of the power that they can bring. They're constrained in terms of land, water as well. So looking for those opportunities, I guess, to work together. I mean, obviously there's a level of competition between some of the countries in the region as well. But if we can find ways for both sides of the party or both parties to win out of this, we're starting to see that, I guess, in Singapore with Batam and Indonesia as well. There's opportunities for everyone. So I think it's all about that, just looking for the wins.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Any other comments on the partnership cooperation? Okay, I'm going to move on. So we talked as well about planning and permitting and that being a potential bottleneck. Let's dive into that a little bit more. Like, what is the challenge? How do we overcome it? And how does it vary across the region? Because as you mentioned, like, completely different regulatory environments, very different setup per country. So Heather, maybe I can start with you.
Yeah, sure. I think, as we've all talked about, the scale now, the volume of projects, and Tom alluded to it earlier around, being a good neighbour, and that's a really important point when we continue to try to build. And it's also like, multiple suppliers are building at the same time, so communities could feel like there's a lot going on and it's moving very quickly. And I think key to planning and permitting is, if you can try to optimize or efficiency that. So in Ireland, for example, they had something called a strategic infrastructure development, where it was kind of like an efficient or fast-tracked planning and permitting. That's ideal, but you need to be a good neighbour in order for the governments to buy into something like that. And so I think, AirTrunk recognises that, and we've actually recently launched 4 community commitments that we're making. So we've kind of we've put that out there, and it's something that we do live by. And I think that the overall goal is to be a good neighbour, to be, optimising your water and power usage, trying to give back to the communities that you're developing in, and putting out the good story that is there around jobs and economic investment in the communities. But I think, if you can get the government cooperation and buy-in, it's super important to being able to deliver what we need to deliver at scale and at the speed at what's required. But planning and permitting is always going to be there. It's just trying to figure out ways to partner in the right way that we can streamline that process a little bit.
Tom?
I think picking up on what Heather was saying, the most critical factor is transparency. I think that as an industry, we can work it out. If we know where the pitch is, we know what the rules of the game are, we can figure out the way to do it. And I think it's keeping that level of consistency and partnership with government and utilities and communities so that we can get these assets built. The buy trigger cycle from our customers is so short that you really want to be as flexible on timing as you can be. And so those markets where you can move quickest through regulatory processes are usually the most successful. And we've seen markets or AI markets being developed in the last 2 years. And one of the main drivers of that has been the speed with which you can work through the development and consent approval process. And so that to me is absolutely critical.
Rob, from TBH perspective?
Yeah, I guess the best practice that we're seeing out there across APAC and more broadly is early engagement with the key regulators, and that is at the national level, the local level as well, making sure that there's, I guess, accurate information about the benefits of building, and if there are concerns, then how do we adapt the design to meet some of those benefits, to deal with some of those concerns. There is a lot of misinformation out there in the media at the moment about, I guess, the benefits and drawbacks, the drawbacks mostly, of data centres. And so I guess having a focus on making sure that the message is the right message getting out there is also an important part.
Mayank?
I agree with what the panelists are saying. And to be fair, the governments are still sort of trying to wrap their heads and arms around this. I mean, countries really haven't seen, and you've seen start-stop reactions in a lot of countries in the region. And early engagement and explaining the context. So when I say early engagement, in a couple of countries we've been early engaged. In a couple of countries we've been early engaged for as far as 2 years. So in a couple of countries we've been early engaged for a couple of years, and so when we actually hit the project start, can you just take this off? So, sorry. So 2 years of pre-work, what that helped us do was to get the project up and running in 6 months. So pre-work is very important, educating the governments, working with the communities, and it's not that high-sounding as I'm making out to be. These are very simple things that can be done, identify specific problems, solve them, and move on. So it's a solvable problem, it just needs a view to not be frustrated and work and get through it.
We talked a lot about the regulatory environments. Can we point to any markets in particular where they're best enabling success in terms of time to market, all of the challenges that we've already talked to? Any examples, or what's the kind of criteria where we're seeing success? I know you're saying early entry, you talked about progressive governments, but let's just dive into that a little bit more.
I think you can just look at where the AI availability zones in APAC have grown up, where it's Melbourne and Mumbai are the two main markets. I would say Sydney was typically the tier 1 market in Australia. It was one of the tier 1 markets in the region. And I think Melbourne has come up very fast because the development approval process is 3 to 4 months there, whereas New South Wales is around about 15 months. And all other factors roughly within availability of sites, ability to scale, availability of power. There's consistency between the two markets. There's not much massive difference in cost. The availability of a strong GC market, strong engineering, strong workforce, et cetera, And so you look at those two markets are very similar. And why has most of the capacity gone into Melbourne currently? I would say it's because of that speed to market around development. As an example.
Rob?
I think Malaysia and Thailand are probably two, and the Philippines is coming up quickly behind, is great examples, I guess, where the government has really stood up and said, we want to build a digital future for our population, and have made the regulatory environment such that it encourages the capital to go there. And I think they're probably the best examples in the region. It's a good one as well about Melbourne as well, because they were very deliberate and very public about, I guess, changing their approach to I guess, encouraging that sort of development, and the results speak for themselves.
I think, yes, evolved markets, talent, ease of doing business are factors which have driven Mumbai and Melbourne to be where they are. But to the point that we were discussing earlier, that AI workloads are going to chase power. And Indonesia is one country where, luckily, power is still surplus, and in parts of it. And more importantly, over our recent engagements with PLN, as we got our approvals for 1.2 gigawatts from the grid, I think the approach that the utility has, that PLN has in this country, is one of the shining examples of how permits can get fast-tracked. Over the last 4 or 5 years, since we've been here, since the industry sort of has started to pick up in the country, some of the problems that you alluded to, Tom, in terms of manpower, workforce, etc., have gradually begun to ease out. So I strongly believe that Indonesia will, in due course, say over the next maybe 12 to 24 months, emerge to be a serious hub of AI in the region.
I don't necessarily have too much addition. I agree with everything that, all the markets that you mentioned. And I think like the key here is the governments that are, trying to deliberately attract the AI workloads. So they are building regulation frameworks. They are trying to ensure that their grids are building out in advance and are robust and able to take it. And I think that that's really what people are looking at when they want to deploy that amount of capacity and capital in somewhere, is that they're looking for that stability, that ability to grow, the friendly regulatory environment that enables them to quickly proceed through the different permits that they need, and to be able to give the customer that solid roadway for growth, because that's what we're seeing is like you can build a gigawatt, but as soon as you're done with that, they want another gigawatt. So it's kind of making sure that you're trying to look as much into the future as possible, and having the stability of and support of that government or environment is really important to making those decisions.
We haven't talked much on the financing side, and I know there's a lot of sort of evolution in terms of financing models. So can we just talk to that a bit? Obviously, there's many different funding methods. So let's maybe start with Mayank and talk to the financing model and how they're evolving.
You have 24 hours? So, so across the whole sort of AI juggernaut that we see, and if you refer to Jensen's 5-layer cake, the way he describes the whole sort of AI, there are constraints at every, there are different constraints at every layer of the cake, but there's one constraint that goes across all of the layers, and that is financing. So two of the most difficult problems to solve, other than, of course, ASML increasing their capacity, two of the most difficult problems to solve are power and financing. And like Heather mentioned that, today the customers are talking about delivery in 6 months, 9 months. And a lot of these customers, I mean, of course, a bunch of them are traditional, well, sort of good credit customers. But there's this whole bunch of juggernaut that, NVIDIA has rolled out called neoclouds. And while they're great, they're sort of, getting a lot of support from NVIDIA. The issue does remain because most of them are first-time customers. Most of them are sort of, startups, so to speak. And 2 men in a truck, and no disrespect, but 2 men in a truck trying to sort of get $1 billion of funding. And that funding also has to support their balance sheet for the data centers. So what that means is the critical issues that remain or that are sort of cropping up more than the industry's usual way of life are credit and speculative build. So if you're looking at delivering not a gigawatt, but probably a few hundred megawatts in 9 to 12 months, there is some capital that has to be spent before the contract gets signed. So, and this sort of roller coaster has been there for about the last 12 odd months, if I may say. What is very encouraging to see that capital is now sort of beginning to wrap its head around this whole AI juggernaut. Given especially the fact that over the last 6 months, AI has started to become real. And what that means is that there are use cases, there are revenues coming in. You have people like Anthropic crying from the rooftop that, my revenues are constrained by compute. So as this starts getting real, you will see different colors of money starting to come in to this space, other than the traditional infra money that sort of has been funding the space forever. And that is, I think, what's going to really give it the next phase of growth. So in addition, so this is in the context of the neoclouds. In the context of traditional businesses, I think that continues to be fine. we see appetite from both equity as well as debt for getting a little more aggressive on the traditional sort of hyperscale business, and which is a good thing for all of us and for the AI ecosystem as well.
Ahead, Tom.
Yeah, to agree with everything Mayank's saying, and just to follow on from that, I think like most development sectors, we're all funded by debt. Debt is critical to the process, and the challenges occur when you're looking at a customer whose covenant strength makes raising debt against that very difficult. And how, as an industry, do we work to find creative solutions to basically widen out that customer base? And so I think the industry is working through that. It will take a bit of time. And one of the key things is you're really looking for investors or capital who are comfortable with the idea of the data center. So that means that you're talking about now very large scale investment. You're talking about stabilization in 2 years as opposed to 5 years. Which really means you need to have that capital and investment lined up to be able to just build out as fast as AI wants to deploy, and that's really challenging. And I think the other way that people need to look at it as well is to really find that comfort with the service level aspect. It's not a traditional real estate investment. There are a whole load of SLAs around a lot of these contracts. And so it's finding capital and getting capital comfortable with that. And capital's coming on the journey and evolution with the data center sector. And as Mayank's already alluded to, it is getting more comfortable, but it's an iterative process which we're having to work through.
Rob?
We provide advice to a lot of large investors, global investors, and I guess the pattern we're starting to see is they're looking at this not at a project-by-project level, but at a sort of program or a platform sort of level. So looking more at sort of the portfolio within a country or within the region, the scale of what they're building, the amount of money that's now being put on the table to play the game, which is what we're seeing now with the AI infrastructure that's coming, means that there's a lot, I guess, more at stake and a lot more at risk. So investors are always looking for that certainty in terms of, it's a proven design, the operator's got the maturity to operate the facility, the GC's a good GC, the supply chain's proven, it's quality plant, etc. Power's locked in. So having those sorts of things is always been the key. I think, as I said, it's getting larger, but the other sort of wild card we've got at the moment is, because the technology is changing so quickly, the ability to have a design that gives you some flexibility to swap out older technology with new technology is really fundamental. And so the investors that we're working with now are really starting to dig in more on the design side and go, this has changed so much in the last 3 years. If I look, these are 25-year assets, and so trying to make a bet now as to what the right design is going to be a real challenge, and it's moving so quickly. So I think there's a few things keeping them awake at night.
Eva?
Yeah, I agree with what the panelists have said, especially around the technology and how quickly it's evolving and how much debt we're looking to sort of raise for projects, and that the banks are not moving as quickly as the industry, and so that has been a journey, but I do agree that it's improving. And I'm learning a lot in this space, actually. It's becoming really interesting. So what I'm learning is that there's also the size that AirTrunk are building at hyperscale. We are talking like sometimes gigawatt projects. So then you're looking at not just a regional raise of capital, it's global pools. And so you're having to reach into these global pools, therefore you're kind of competing against global projects, and I'm thinking particularly in the US. And so what's becoming really interesting in conversations with customers is that you really have to partner with them on the right terms in order to ensure that you are successful in that financing at scale. So it's been a really interesting conversation, I think, generally with the industry, and the financiers are coming into the conversation in a big way, and we're seeing them at all these conferences and GTC, and they're learning about this fast-moving AI, and I think it's really good and moving in the right direction, but it will continue to be a challenge as we all are trying to deploy at the same time.
What about the role of government here in attracting capital into the market? Is that a sort of really important driver to make sure that capital is coming into the country, within the region? Like, what's the role for the government here? Mayank, maybe.
Oh, the government has a huge role to play, and sort of it's at various levels. So, simplistic way to look at it is that stable governments, stable countries will attract a lower cost of capital. The second layer to look at this is how are the governments really affecting sort of ease of doing business, things which the panel discussed earlier about permitting, power availability, time to. And I think the last but not the least, and this sort of gets looked over a few times, is efforts to develop human capital. And Tom alluded to the fact that Melbourne and Mumbai have taken off, and one of the key reasons is availability of human capital. And that, I think, is something which the governments really need to focus to. So we, for instance, at BDX, we work with the governments across the countries that we're in to make sure that we, for lack of a better way of saying it, we catch them young. So we're working with governments going into the universities, the polytechnics, to sort of get the technicians trained, et cetera, One sparrow does not make a summer. So it does, I think, need an industry-wide coordination to work with the governments and keep sort of re-emphasizing some of these issues again and again and finding simple solutions to them. All of these appear to be very global, big problems. To find the exact problem, solve it, and move on.
From your perspective?
I think Mayank's hit the nail on the head. It's transparency, ease of doing business, because the first rule of investment is how do I get my money out with my profits? And you want that level of consistency throughout the process. As Mayank said, Rob, I think it was 25-year assets. You want those are the key factors.
Rob, from your perspective?
I think government's role is, there's no need to provide incentives, but I think that the developments are the right developments that I guess provide, and I've used this word a number of times today, the win-win outcomes. If you can build infrastructure precincts where you've got a data centre that's tied to a generation facility, that's tied to, say, water and desalination or treatment plant or something like that, how do we use excess heat, all those sorts of things. If you can make all those things happen in the same area, that's a great outcome for the community, for the country. And so thinking, I guess, about how do we encourage the right developments, I think is how I would answer that question.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the challenges today, from power, planning, permitting, regulatory environments. I think one of the things that's really coming through is that speed to market and that ability to scale. So how important is collaboration here? Maybe I can start with you, Heather.
I mean, I think it's super important across all of the sort of verticals. Supply chain was mentioned at the beginning. I think that is a huge one where there's opportunity for collaboration across markets, with customers, with vendors. But it is hard because I think Rob alluded to earlier the variability in the technology and what customers want to deploy and what they want to deploy now versus what they might want to deploy at a retrofit. And then across the chip manufacturers as well, like it results in huge differences in your technology, cooling, your white space, the density, like there's just so many things. And trying to think about what that looks like in the future today when it's moving so quickly, it's hard. And so maybe there's an opportunity for some collaboration there too. And don't get me wrong, I particularly think like, NVIDIA and AMD and stuff are really good at opening up their roadmap to suppliers to give us that sort of see-through as much as we can so we can try to future-proof. That is a level of collaboration which is very appreciated, and I think it does make a difference. But I think, similarly for other vendors and other supply chain elements, I think that's a huge opportunity for collaboration.
Rob?
I think Heather's nailed it. I couldn't say it any better.
Anything to add?
The only thing I'd add is I think we've got to collaborate more as an industry. We're maturing very fast. We're now in the global spotlight. We're focused on by governments and communities, and we need to come together to address those concerns. And frankly, I think we've ostriched it a little bit up to this point, and we need to get get closer and learn from what's happening in the States, because what's happening in the US will start happening here if we don't engage with communities and governments in the right way. And we're a big enough industry now, there's a big enough piece of the pie for everybody, so we should be doing that together as a united front as far as possible.
Hank?
So I think picking on what Heather said and what Tom said, so NVIDIA is not only for people like us telling us that the rack densities are going up to a megawatt. They are also working with their supply ecosystem and getting it co-designed. And the co-design that NVIDIA does is off the charts. And Stack has done some co-design with the vendors. We do co-design with our vendors. I think it is absolutely imperative that and co-design is just one sort of small part of it. It's absolutely imperative that the operator, the vendor community, the supply chain ecosystem, and the customers. I didn't touch the button this time. So yes, co-innovating across the entire chain. Sorry about this. Co-innovating across the entire value chain is far more serious. And like Tom said, we've been ostriches till now. We really need to get our heads out of the sand and start doubling down on it.
Thank you. Okay, we're running close to time. So last question for you. If we were having this conversation in 3 years' time, which I'm sure we probably will actually, what does success look like? Paint the picture. Heather, maybe if I can start with you.
Sure. I'm an optimist, so I'd like to paint a rosy picture. But seriously, I do think the success is going to look like quick deployment. So things like, we're already getting there with modular design, prefab, all these things. Like, I think we'll fine-tune that, and in the next 3 years, perhaps that's going to be, a lot more smooth. And so quick deployment. I would love to say sustainable power run, because the power, it's an issue. If we can do some self-generation with, BESS is becoming a big part of behind-the-meter solutions. But yeah, so sustainably powered, and I think efficient, improving on PUEs and becoming very efficient with water and power usage, but also like giving the right productive outcomes for the customers. So like allowing their AI workloads to run how they want them to run, so that we were talking about it earlier. It's now, tokens are now profitable. So like at the end of the day, that's what they're trying to achieve, and then it comes back to us. And so I think, yeah, that I'd like to say in 3 years that we're going to have a lot faster but more sustainable solutions to provide customers.
Thank you. Rob?
I think that there's no doubt that the scale of what we'll be talking about in 3 years' time is going to be a lot larger. I can see this running for at least the next 3 to 5 years before there's any sort of slowdown. It's hard to know where this is all going to go to. I think that speed to market is going to be the key, but to have speed to market, you need to have certainty of delivery as well. And I guess that the best organisations are the ones that are going to have very good discipline around, I guess, the planning and the preparation, and then the control systems to monitor and maintain a focus on and the balance on cost and time, and the technical risk and the construction risk and the operational risk and the commercial risk that you're balancing when you're taking a stake that we are with building these $1 billion plus facilities. We've spoken about prefabrication, Heather mentioned just then. I think there's a couple of projects we've been involved in the last few years which have been prefabricated and have been complete disasters in terms of when they got the materials to site and tried to put it all together, it just didn't work. And one of them was a very expensive lesson for everyone. And so success, for me, is really about sort of having that, I guess, those sorts of base building blocks like prefabrication, which gets around a lot of some of the labour challenges and supply chain issues and de-risks a lot of that side of things, so we can build in different markets. But doing it smart and having the discipline to control it and monitor it and make sure that when we get those things to site, it all plugs in correctly. So, yeah, lots of moving parts.
For me, I would say it's social license to operate. I think there's a lot of net benefits from data centers. It'd be great to see that being picked up in the community. We do create jobs, usually high-skilled jobs. We contribute lots of revenue, local taxation coffers, that kind of thing. And I think having basically the public sort of work through over the next 3 years and seeing the benefit that data centers can provide to the community directly as well as indirectly through a very, very important part of the AI stack.
Thank you. Mayank.
Just for fun, let me be the skeptic here. So I think 3 to 5 years from now, success is going to be about flexibility. The way we see the chip layer of AI evolving is mind-blowing. You saw Cerebras list. You saw Jonathan Ross, $20 billion. And you've seen NVIDIA putting up small sort of panels at your home for inference deployment. Today morning, I saw on LinkedIn that some innovative guy in China has actually put together a few mini Macs. And he's been able to create an H100 equivalent output out of some 50, 60 Macs. That is about 10% of the cost of an H100 traditionally. And then there is Elon Musk. Data centers in space. So I think 3 to 5 years from now, what's going to define success is having your ear absolutely close to the ground and to the environment, and course correcting very quickly. So, till about a year ago, like Hadar alluded, the conversation used to be about obsolescence of design. Today, that is a solved problem. People don't even care about obsolescence of design. It will get solved. What we have to care about is that when we're putting in capital for assuming a 15, 20-year, whatever lifespan of the asset, is it really going to be still required with that amount of intensity on the planet?
Fantastic, thank you.
Can't help sound intelligent.
Thank you so much to all of my panel. A very insightful kickoff to the event today. There's lots of deep dives into some of the issues that we've talked about from power and planning going on the other stages and on this stage throughout today and tomorrow. So thank you, and please join me in thanking my panelists.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, just to let you know that the panel debates have started. They're in some of the other adjacent event spaces that we've got, so please do make your way to some of the debates. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Bali. Good morning, Indonesia. Thank you for the warm welcome. I'm Vlad. I am going to take you through a little bit about generative AI and the impact that this has on data center design. First and foremost, thank you for tuning in on the live stream, wherever you're from. And without further ado, let's get to it, right? We've built this course as part of DCD to basically kind of like paint a thorough picture in terms of what this new type of workload means for the data center. A little bit about me. I'm Vlad. I've been with DCD for 13 years now, essentially architecting, delivering, and building learning programs for enterprises of all shapes and sizes working within the data center sector. So, a little bit about our training arm, first and foremost. We're DCD Academy. DCD Academy is the training arm of Data Center Dynamics. And DCD has always been about informing people, informing the next generation of talent, and developing the next generation of talent. We've trained above more than 30,000 professionals across NAM, APAC, EMEA, and LATAM. So we're a global organization. All of our courses are available in pretty much any language you need. So, generative AI, right? This course is part of a wider library called the Infrastructure Evolution series. And essentially, this library is an ever-growing course library that focuses on the latest trends and the latest direction that the industry is taking. So, let's jump into it. Defining, first and foremost, generative AI. What is generative AI? Well, let's hear it from the horse's mouth, as they say, right? AI is the capability of a computer program or a machine to think and learn and take actions, right, without being explicitly encoded with commands. A key benefit of AI systems, right, is the ability to actually learn from experiences or learn patterns from data. That's the big thing here, right? It can adjust on its own when your inputs and data are fed into these systems. So, if we are to look at what OpenAI considers to be artificial general intelligence, highly autonomous systems that outperform humans at most economically valuable work. Now that's, how should I put this? That's a very broad definition, right? We all have tried ChatGPT, right? ChatGPT came about in November 2022, and it's built on GPT-3, or it was back then. It's very important to understand how we actually got here from a technical concept perspective, first and foremost, right? So the journey of AI actually starts in the 1940s, believe it or not. When the first computer networks were designed, researchers were thinking, how about designing a computer network that matches the brain? Therefore, the term neural networks is born. In the 50s, we devised the Turing test, right? I'm gonna cover the Turing test in a bit. Fun fact, in the 1960s, we had the world's first chatbot in the 1960s, right? The world's first chatbot was called Eliza. It was a computer therapist designed at MIT. Now, this computer therapist was very, very limited. It often parroted users' answers, and was actually designed to show the limitations of such a technology. It had the completely opposite effect. Everyone was very, very curious where this is going to go next. In the 90s, we managed to make computers understand what they were seeing in images, right? So computer vision came to be. In the 2000s, we started amassing massive amounts of data, hence the term big data. And we needed to make sense of those massive amounts of data. In comes machine learning. In the 2010s, an AI program beats the world champion at Go. That program was called AlphaGo. And finally, in the 2020s, large language models actually pass the Turing test. What is the Turing test? Well, the Turing test was coined by Alan Turing, right? And essentially, if a computer behaves like a human, it may be considered intelligent. In the test, a human interrogator communicates remotely with both the computer and the human. And it must identify which is based on their answers. A computer's intelligence is judged by how often it is mistaken for the human. As we said in the previous slide, in 2020, LLMs passed the Turing test. Now, we've looked at the technological concepts that brought AI to the fore. Let's look at the infrastructure concepts that brought AI to the fore. In the 40s, as I said, the very first computer networks show up. In the 50s, we've got mainframe computers. In the 60s, we understood that time-sharing systems are absolutely critical in order to maintain networks and make networks possible. Computer networks, that is. In the 90s, we've seen the internet expand extremely rapidly, right? So fast that in the 2000s, we've got cloud computing. In the 2010s, we've got edge computing. Finally, in this decade, we now have AI data centers. So, what are AI models to begin with? Well, models can come in different shapes and sizes, right? First and foremost, everything we do right now in terms of AI is essentially deep learning. Deep learning is a form of machine learning. And machine learning is essentially a form of artificial intelligence. Some uses of AI people are already familiar with, like dynamic pricing engines, algorithm trading, ad spend optimization, demand forecasting. Now, generative uses of AI are what's new here, right? Writing tasks, material synthesis, customer-facing chatbots, design drafts, so on and so forth. Now, models have evolved. And why is this important for the data center crowd? Well, first and foremost, you design from the workload up. You need to understand what this workload does and how this workload behaves. So, in the early 2000s, we had feature-centric models. You built a model for a specific task. In the 2010s, we started seeing deep learning, which basically is a model-centric way of creating AI. You basically pre-train the model, and then it will be good for a set of tasks. Those tasks quite limited still. Finally, foundation models, on which ChatGPT is based, for example, are now data-centric. So they receive a lot of data, and then they are good to essentially perform multiple types of tasks. Some examples of foundation models, right? OpenAI GPT-3, we've just talked about it. This is behind ChatGPT. Google's BERT is basically behind Gemini. Meta's large language model, Meta AI, is again another foundational model. And finally, DeepMind's AlphaFold was actually responsible for finding, well, or at least for helping to find the recipe that basically got behind the COVID vaccine. So, there's two types of workloads when we're dealing with AI, right? The first one is essentially training. Training essentially represents the process of building a model by learning from data samples. Now, when you are sending a prompt to ChatGPT, you're essentially creating an inference workload. Inference is the process of using that model to make a prediction with new data, that new data being your prompt. The way it works is relatively simple. This diagram comes straight from NVIDIA, and they explain it in the following way. If you have an untrained network model, and then you feed it a training data set alongside a deep learning framework. In this particular instance, the training data set is pictures of cats. And the model can determine if an image is a cat or a dog. Based on this training data set, it will be able to essentially determine if the image that has been fed is of a dog or of a cat. That basically gives you the actual model. When you're using it, when you're using this model, you're uploading a picture. Based on that picture and based on the previous capability that was trained in this AI, it will be able to essentially tell you if that is a cat or not. This is a very simplistic example, obviously. But the majority of large language models and the majority of models function in this way. Now, it's very important to understand that training and inference types of workloads behave completely differently, right? Your training workload is not something that you are used to if you've operated a normal data center. Your training workload is the type of workload that usually sits at 100% utilization, if done right, obviously. Inferencing, on the other hand, it's a little bit more akin to your traditional cloud workload. Inferencing is very latency sensitive. Training isn't, right? Training can be paused, can be resumed. It doesn't have the same reliability requirements as an inference workload. Now, why is everyone building data center after data center after data center? It is not because of the training workloads. It is because of the inference workloads. And those inference workloads, if you want a fast, proper response to your particular prompt, then that inference workload needs to be distributed and needs to be as close to you as the end user as possible. Therefore, training will always happen in the core data center. Training takes immense amounts of operational excellence to actually achieve it. And as well as that, because both training and inferencing function on what we know as GPUs, or graphical processing units, the power requirements are quite high. With the power requirements being quite high, again, it is very important to understand that a training workload will always happen in the core data center. An inference workload will always take place at the edge. Again, defining the edge as close to the user as possible, really. This opens up multiple things. Because inference happens at the edge, there are other things that happen at the edge. If we are to look forward towards smart cities, smart industry, smart traffic systems, smart transportation, and so on and so forth, everything in the edge data center essentially allows the next, I would say, how should I put this? Allows the next stage of infrastructure evolution to actually happen. So, how does a model operate? Well, pretty much all models go through the same type of steps, right? First and foremost, training, right? We create the foundation model by training it on massive data sets. Large language models like ChatGPT were essentially formed by using all publicly available text that's out there on the internet, right? Then a model goes through the tuning phase. The tuning phase basically represents the finer adjustments so that it actually, in case of a large language model, so that it actually sounds and behaves in the same way a human would. So basically, tuning is customizing the foundation model for specific applications. In the case of a large language model, so that it sounds as close to the real thing as possible. Now, One more important step in this is generation, evaluation, and retuning, right? Continuously improving the output quality and accuracy of the generative AI application. Finally, inference, right? Inference occurs after the model has been trained. It's the process of using this trained model to make predictions and draw new conclusions from raw, unseen data, right? Again, as I was saying earlier, inference in the case of ChatGPT represents you sending that prompt out to the model. Now, AI versus traditional workloads. Again, they're different, right? When it comes to the compute intensity, well, we've kind of covered this a bit, right? They require high-performance GPUs, otherwise known as accelerators, for parallel processing, often leading to ultra-dense compute racks. We're going to have a look at what a rack like this looks in a minute. The traditional workload, right, uses CPUs for general-purpose processing, typically resulting in lower power density per rack. This is your traditional data center. This is your up to 10 kilowatts per rack type of data center. The storage needs, right? AI systems and AI workloads depend on massive storage systems to accommodate large data sets for both training and inference, whereas traditional workloads use moderate storage capacity, typically focused on transactional or operational data. Latency tolerance. Now, when defining latency, it's a very interesting thing because traditionally, legacy workloads, or cloud-based workloads, if you will, are very latency sensitive as well. But they are very latency sensitive from the north to south point of the data center. North to south in a data center basically means outside of the data center and inside the data center. Whereas AI workloads require extremely low latency infrastructure east to west. East to west means traffic that basically stays inside the data center. The latency requirements of generative AI application, when referring to training, refer to that east to west traffic. Refer to the traffic inside the data center facility. Both, though, require quite low latency when it comes to the operation of it. Now, scalability. They require a highly scalable infrastructure to support exponential growth in data and compute needs. Whereas traditional workloads, we're used to how these workloads scale, right? We can scale more predictably with these. From a network bandwidth point of view, demand significantly higher network bandwidth to handle the data movement, again, that east to west traffic. And finally, from a deployment flexibility point of view, they benefit from hybrid models with on-premise infrastructure combined with cloud or edge for agility. Again, the training happens at the core, the inference happens at the edge. And this is why a hybrid mix between on-prem and edge and cloud is the way to go when you're actually deploying AI workloads. So we've talked about AI, we've talked about GPUs, we've talked about GPUs, CPUs. What's the difference between them and why are they so important? Well, it's fairly simple, right? So CPUs, your traditional cloud workload, are really, really good for sequential instructions. One instruction after the next. In order to move to the next instruction, the first one needs to be completed. Now, in this particular instance, machine-to-machine communication is relatively basic, right? Loading a website is your traditional CPU-based workload. How does a website actually load? Well, everything is known, everything operates within the data center world. Well, from a traditional workload point of view, everything operates in a client-server model, right? So when you're loading a website, you're essentially receiving bit by bit. It happens very fast. You're not seeing it. But you're receiving the text, the logo, the background, the buttons, the video, and everything else that makes that website together, right? Everything happens sequentially, one by one by one by one. You don't notice this, and all of a sudden, bam, the website is loaded. Now, GPUs, or graphical processing units, are designed for parallel processing of instructions, which means instructions can be executed simultaneously, but machine-to-machine communication is extremely complex, going back to that east-to-west traffic in the data center. Now, a great example of a GPU-based workload is rendering a 3D environment in a modern multiplayer game. The way video games are actually displayed on someone's screen is through a graphical processing unit, essentially rendering millions of polygons at the same time, which is why instructions can be executed simultaneously. If those polygons are not rendered at the same time, often more than 60 times a second actually, you will not have a good experience while you're playing, right? Which is interesting because every single gamer would have been familiar with NVIDIA before NVIDIA skyrocketed in terms of share price, right? It just so happens that the same parallel processing of instructions, right, fits on massive, massive data sets and making sense of those massive, massive data sets. That is why GPUs are in use when it comes to generative AI and AI in general. Now, AI hardware comes in all shapes and sizes. It can be as an FPGA or a field programmable gate array. It can be as GPUs, as we just seen, or it can be as ASICs or as TPUs. This is what Google uses, for example. TPUs standing for tensor processing arrays. Now, every single one of these chips is essentially a chip that is designed for parallel execution of instructions, not sequential. Now, a lot of people have said multiple times that basically Moore's law is dead, and that advancements in chip manufacturing are no longer seeing the parabolic rise that we used to see in terms of CPUs. I agree if we're only looking at the CPU side of things. If we're looking at the GPU side of things, how is that not an exponential growth? We're going from, before 2010, the training compute doubling time was 21.6 months. After 2010, when everyone started understanding how AI is actually done, the training compute double time is 6 months. On a CPU architecture, that used to be 2 years. So that basically tells us that when it comes to hardware refreshes, be prepared to essentially go from 3 years of a hardware refresh to maybe 6 months. Now, the data center will play a double role when it comes to the serving of these workloads. First and foremost, it will act as the development center, right? New models will be developed in the data center. We'll fine-tune existing models in the data center, and we will customize it for specific tasks. As well as that, the deployment will also happen on the data center side. Real-time applications, chatbots, fraud detection, edge devices, serving predictions in production systems. Everything happens in the data center, from development to deployment and to fine-tuning. The data center essentially sits at the core of this new type of workload. And not only that, because as we've covered, graphical processing units require way more power than CPUs, right? Because of this, the very first area that is affected by this new type of workload, power distribution and generation. And how should I put this? In the data center industry, there used to be this adage called location, location, location. Wherever you had an empty field, that would have been good. You could have dragged in a couple of megawatts of power, you're sorted. Problem is, we don't have enough power now. So location, location, location kind of moved towards, is there power available in that location or not? So again, with power distribution and generation, we're looking at renewable sources integration. We're looking at microgrids. And finally, we're looking at becoming prosumers, working with the wider grid to actually turn from a big consumer into a prosumer, actually. Because in a lot of instances, the data center can absolutely aid the wider grid and when it comes to stabilization. Now, with more power, we've got more heat. With more heat, we've got the second area of the second affected area, which is environmental control and monitoring, right? 13 years ago, when I went to my first data center event in London in 2014, I remember seeing an immersion cooling tank. And I was like, oh my God, this is going to be the absolute future. Everyone is going to embrace it. Little did I know, back then, quite naive myself, that the data center industry is very risk averse. So we're still having the conversation on liquid cooling 13 years later, 12 years later, sorry. But yes, now we will be talking definitely about liquid cooling, especially direct to chip. Direct to chip, mostly because it's the easiest one to retrofit in an already air-cooled facility. Finally, we've talked about the east to west traffic. We've talked about the north to south traffic. Networking cabling is the third primary area affected, right? We've got huge bandwidth requirements, denser, heavier cables, and finally, edge integration. All of these things need to work in perfect synchronicity in order to support training and inference workloads. So let's have a look at what we're dealing with, basically. This is, I mean, again, this is already out of date, right? Because we're talking about GB300. It just goes to show how fast this thing is moving right now. But for the purposes of understanding what we're dealing with, let's have a look at an NVIDIA GB200 rack scale AI, right? You've got it in the image here. Looks very nice. What does it contain? Well, at the top of the rack, you've got 2 management Ethernet switches, followed by 4 power shelves, followed by 10 compute nodes, and then 9 NVLink switches. We're going to touch base on that in a second. Followed by another 8 compute nodes, 4 power shelves at the bottom, and finally seismic bracing so that it doesn't go anywhere. But let's have a deeper look at it. This is how it looks. So you can just buy this, right? And it's delivered into your data center. Now, what's the first thing that we notice? Liquid cooling. It comes with liquid cooling manifolds. It comes with liquid cooling hoses. It is basically an AI cluster in a box, if you will. Again, the power cables are already installed in the bezel mounting braces. You have, and the power bus bar, you can actually see it here. Let's have a deeper look at it. This is one of the 18 compute trays that this rack scale AI cluster uses, right? Sorry, not cluster. It's a cluster once you have 8 of them. So, right? We are talking about 2 Grace CPUs, and 4 Blackwell GPUs. That single rack has 72 GPUs in it, along with 16 CPUs. And again, it basically, the scale of change, you can actually see it here, right? Because first and foremost, you've got the inlet for the cold water, comes in, cools both CPUs, goes to the GPUs, to the power distribution board, comes out via the hot water outlet, right? So again, liquid cooling is it's a must at this point, right? How much do you think this rack draws in terms of power? 125 kilowatts. Yeah, exactly. Just one, right? And in order to actually have a proper deployment of AI compute, you would need about 8 of them. And even then, it's not enough, right? So imagine you're going from 6, 7 kilowatts a rack to 125 for one rack. And again, what the good thing is, NVIDIA actually thought about it, so it comes with the power connector already put together. You just hopefully have thick enough cables to actually deliver the power to this, right? Again, if we are to go even deeper, right? Those NVLink switches essentially ensure that every single GPU communicates with every other single GPU, right? And this is the diagram, right? So we've got 9 NVLink trays, all of them connecting 72 GPUs, and how much did I say? And those CPUs as well. Just think about the scale and size of what operators need to be dealing with right now. It is unforeseen, unseen before, and not only that, it's changing the design paradigm when it comes to data centers. It completely throws the rule book out the door. And what essentially kind of like do I mean by that? Well, in a DGX system architecture, right? This is essentially, this comes from NVIDIA, by the way. This is directly from the horse's mouth, if you will. Again, there's multiple forms for the DGX or for AI clusters. This is basically through DGX boxes, and this is how you would connect 16 of them, right, to a storage appliance, to a management node, and finally outside of the data center. It seems complicated, and it is. Because again, you've got multiple GPUs all ensuring they sing from the same hymn sheet, if you will. When it comes to the typical AI deployment, as I said, most of it is handled in the core data center, but it's also an edge play as well. You can't have one without the other. So from a hyperscale or from a core perspective, you can be anywhere between 20 to 100 megawatts for a typical AI deployment, right? I know we're talking about gigawatt campuses, but this is kind of like where the ballpark is. They will be located in capital cities or metro areas. They will be concentrated in high-density grid locations. There is increased need for high voltage, or at least medium voltage transmission lines, right? When you're dealing with 125 kilowatts per rack, you need more power coming in. You need power at a higher level coming in, right? And they will have large fleets of backup generators concentrated in areas. Now, this, as we evolve, might change. Because we're talking about microgrids, we're talking about integrated renewables. A lot of people are looking at fuel cells now, and so on and so forth. The edge deployment is 50 kilowatts to 5 megawatts. It's location agnostic, with loads distributed across existing grid infrastructure. There is a reduced need for significant upgrades, but distributed backup power density as well. Now, When it comes to your typical AI deployment, again, training happens in the core data center, inferencing happens at the edge. Otherwise, the latency is going to be too big, the processing time is going to be too long, and you're going to lose the user. Now, operational implications. What does that mean from someone that operates data centers? Well, simple. When it comes to the increased power consumption, you've got AI workloads that demand ultra-high density racks, consuming over 100 kilowatts per rack, compared to 5 to 15 kilowatts for traditional data centers, right? Again, more power, more heat, more need for heat removal. AI workloads will often require liquid cooling to handle increased heat density. You need dynamic resource allocation, right? Training and inference workloads have fluctuating compute, storage, and bandwidth needs. It depends on the type of workload you're dealing with. And you also need real-time monitoring. Otherwise, AI workloads will not actually function properly because, first and foremost, they demand low latency on that east to west traffic. They require real-time monitoring for power cooling and network performance. Now, from a design perspective, right? We've got a lot of things, right? Like we've got GPUs, we've got massive storage systems, we've got low latency infrastructure, and this, from an operations point of view, right? There's an issue because if we have high performance GPUs that are used 100% at 100% of the time, right? We're going to accelerate wear and tear. So again, maintenance strategies, periodic hardware upgrades are absolutely crucial to make it work. From a storage perspective, right, you need backup solutions. You can pause a training workload, but you would still need to resume it from wherever it left. If you don't have backup systems, that's not going to work. From a latency point of view, you need to implement advanced routing. You need to work with the cloud, and you need to deploy at the edge. Now, I'm actually nearing time. So, the role of hyperscalers. Because this is such a huge investment, hyperscalers have the role of the educator, if you will. They're the first ones to actually work with this type of technology. Being the first ones to work with this type of technology, they need to educate the rest, right? And a great example is what Google did with DeepMind. They essentially let an AI model, they built an AI model that essentially has been fed years and years and years of operational data from across all of their data centers. The result? In about 6 months, they managed to cut 40% of their cooling costs just by fine-tuning certain values that their algorithm basically deemed high impact in terms of efficiency and increasing efficiency, right? This is just one example. There's multiple of them, but this is something that resonates quite well with data center operators, simply because it sings to that efficiency paradigm. So, there's a lot of investments happening right now, right? Generative AI in production, 92%, right, of organizations will put Gen AI into production this year. 51% of third-party providers will bridge Gen AI technology and skills gaps, which is what we're doing here at the end of the day. And 71% of enterprises will run AI infrastructure on premises, right? And again, that is how it should be done. Simply because companies, how should I put this, possess valuable, unique information and data that they want customers to find and use. For the data-driven business of today, that is data value, and generative AI is a solution. Now, generative AI opens another door. That is Industry 4.0, intelligent automation. Again, I'm not going to bore you through this whole thing, but we are actively, through generative AI, we are actively opening the door to smart cities. We're actively opening the door to smart industry and smart manufacturing. And in a way, this is just the start, right? We are at the cusp of a new technology, and the way industry and society is going to use it is going to determine a lot the future. Now, again, we've been talking about power. Once I'm finished, by the way, stick around because our APAC trainer lead will also lead a session on power distribution, which is kind of like the holy grail of today, right? But let's look at the power challenge, right? In 1975, Cray 1, which was the first supercomputer, used 115 kilowatts of power, and that was considered massive back then. Frontier, which is the most advanced supercomputer today, uses 22.7 megawatts, and that is HPC, it's not even AI. So it's high-performance compute. It's not artificial intelligence type of compute. But it just goes to show, right? Like the further we evolve, the further we double down on computing, the further and the higher the power demands go. Now, again, I see I'm nearing time, so I'm gonna essentially kind of like just touch base on a microgrid. This is, in a perfect world, every data center will be built like this. In a perfect world. We don't live in a perfect world, but the whole idea is simple. What is a microgrid at the end of the day? Well, a microgrid is basically your own type of power generation. Like there is this movement in the industry called bring your own power, and this is explained quite well here. As we can very well see, we have multiple power generation sources: methane, fuel cells, hydrogen, wind, solar. All of these are connected together and controlled by something called a microgrid controller. Now, that microgrid controller is going to be able to tell you if it's cheaper to produce your own power or just get it from the grid. That microgrid controller will also essentially be able to work with the wider grid in order to, again, help it stabilize if it's going through a period of immense demand. Again, as I said, in a perfect world, every data center will be built like this. Now, this is basically my last slide, and I kind of want to leave you with this case study that we did with one of our clients. They had a 960 kilowatt data center. They had 176 racks with a fluctuating load. They decided to strip everything out and just use that for training. They now have only 8 racks for the night for the same 960 kilowatts, but the load is at 100%, no fluctuation. Weirdly, you could roller skate in that IT hall now because it went from 176 racks to just 8. And there's 8 racks in the center of the IT hall and nothing else. That being said, if you're interested in anything I've presented today or anything that my colleague is going to present in a moment, we're at Stand 58. Have a chat with us. We've been building learning programs for the data center industry for the last, 25 years, really. And yeah, this can be taken on demand as a digital course. It can be done as a workshop with myself or with one of our master trainers. So yeah, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Navid Golshani. I'm a data center market lead at Stantec. It's an engineering consultancy services. And I've been grateful to have been working with DCD Academy, teaching their power professional courses throughout for APAC region and EMEA region. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the importance of power and basically a very, very short version of the Power Professional course that I'm doing with DCD Academy. A little bit about DCD Academy. Vlad has already mentioned that DCD Academy is doing an amazing job bridging the gap of skill shortage in the industry for many, many years, and I've been grateful to working with them for the past 3-4 years. My contribution to that 30,000 plus numbers was around 300 plus basically professionals that attended my course during the past couple of years. The Power Professional course has some main categories or the topics that starts from the very, very basic power stuff, like what is voltage, what is amperage, what is that, what is the rack density, what do we need to know about the ampacity, different types of generation, and then how do we size the utility, like what are the things that we would need to know about utility connection, whether it's a grid connection, whether it's the behind the meter, bring your own power, microgrid, or whatever that is. What are the things that we need to know and consider? This course also covers different types of UPS, static, offline, online, double conversion, silicon carbide MOSFETs, MV UPS, so on and so forth. Energy storage, we're all familiar with lithium-ion batteries, VRLA batteries in the previous generations of data centers, or LTO, lithium titanium oxides, nickel zinc, different type of energy storage, as well as these were all the chemical type of energy storage, as well as the kinetic form of energy storage, like flywheels that we used to see them back in the days in the hybrid rotary UPSs or in drops, diesel rotary UPSs. Emergency generation, mainly diesel generators, reliability and availability, and the importance of understanding what 5.9 actually means. We've all heard about 5.9s. We want our data center to be 99.999% available. What does it mean? You've heard it from vendors that our UPS, because it's a modular UPS, it offers very, very low MTTR or mean time to repair. And as a result of that, you'll get 5.9, 99.999%. What does it mean? So the course aims is basically to understand everything we need to know about DC and AC distribution, generation, all the way from the source down to the final destination being the IT load. Whether it's a cloud computing load, whether it's an AI load, the differences between those, and so on and so forth. So this is the course agenda. We're not going to cover all of these today. This course is normally delivered over 21 hours, usually either in 5 half days or 3 full days. But this is the agenda basically for the course. So you've heard in the morning in the major panel that one of the biggest bottleneck or the challenge associated with building a data center or basically introducing a new project is power. A little bit of it is because of the growth in AI load, in computing load. Obviously, as also Vlad mentioned in his presentation, we've seen the scale of the growth back in the days following the Moore's law, and now it's a really, really basically high pace of growth in terms of the rack densities, all the way started from 1 to 2 kilowatts, and now we're talking about even 1 megawatt in a single rack, right? So that obviously all contributed to this supply and demand mismatch. So the first one is the growing power demands. When obviously we have the demands growing, and at the same time we're not building enough infrastructure to support that load, there is going to be a mismatch. So what are the challenges with building the infrastructure at the same time? Most of these countries, especially in the APAC region, they all have old or legacy type grids. That means all of our transmission lines, sub-transmission line, power stations, they're all old and legacy. And they can't build as fast as we can build our data centers. So that is the problem. The next problem is when there is a supply and demand mismatch, there is a risk of downtime, or there is a risk of the grid telling the operator, sorry, I don't have power. And then as a result of that, we've seen in other markets, especially in US, in Northern Ireland, in Europe, we've heard about the new concept of BYOP, bring your own power. The grid would say, sorry, I don't have power. If you want to build a data center, no problem from my side, bring your own power, because we're incapable to give you power. And then there are cost implications. Who's going to pay for it? These are one of the reasons that, this is one of the reasons that we've seen the social license becomes very important now. General public being afraid of they're going to be affected by the basically consumer price index. Who's going to pay for it? Are the general public are going to pay for the grid upgrade, or the data centers will? And you know, bodies and companies like, for example, Data Center Australia are doing an amazing job to raise that public awareness that it's not general public, at least not in most of the countries in our regions are not general public, and data centers are paying for that infrastructure upgrade. Data centers like NextCC, AirTrunk, whoever, CDC, they all contribute and pay for that network upgrade in the grid. And the other thing is energy efficiency. So with that supply and demand mismatch, I think everyone's doing everything that they can to kind of like close that gap a little bit to make that demand and supply match each other. And we're doing everything that we can to push the energy efficiency higher, to reduce the demand and matching it with the basically supply side. Now, the other aspect of the social license and with bring your own power is linked with sustainability. For many, many years, data centers are being pointed at and being basically, how should I say, they've been targeted by medias, by general public that, oh, you're using all of the power in the grid, you should be green, and with environmental activists, and so on and so forth. There is actually a cool website called datacenterwatch.org. It's looking at the US market, not in our market, unfortunately, but they have very good statistics that would show you that how many projects in US being rejected or canceled or postponed just because of the social license. I think last year, around $65 billion were rejected by public opinions just because no one liked data centers. And we need to tap into this a little bit further. If all data centers wanted to go to become green tomorrow, what's the pathway? So first of all, most of the renewable generation sources as the fuel sources are intermittent. They're not constant, whereas data center loads are, especially for AI inference, as you've seen in Vlad's point of the presentation, they're almost constant loads. So we can't have the data centers to be turned on when sun is out there and turn it off when the sun is not out there. Or if you're relying on the wind turbine, we can't have the data center running when the wind is out there and the wind turbine is working, and when it's not working, we just shut everything down. So obviously, that's not going to be possible. And as you can see, most of these fuel sources as the renewable energy fuel sources, such as wind being intermittent, solar is daily, seasonal, tidal, hydro, pumps, and all of those are not constant. So we can't heavily just rely on one of these solutions and say, the problem is solved. Now we fix the problem, we basically brought our own power, and it is renewable. So in terms of the power utility connections, as I mentioned, there are a few things that we need to think about. One is the quality of the supply. First of all, is there enough power on the grid that we can tap into? That's the first question. The second question is, how good is that power, right? Is it good enough that I can use it without having UPS, without having any type of battery storage on site, just using basically the grid power without doing anything extra? Next one is expansion capability. We've seen so many data centers that we've designed the site 3 years ago. And while the site was in the LLE basically process to get the long lead equipment items delivered, getting the planning approval, getting the building to be built, contractors to install things, and by the time that the building is ready, that site, for example, used to be 100 megawatt. Now, 100 megawatt is nothing, right? So we need to expand. But how are we going to expand? We've been waiting in the queue to get power from the grid for many years. Therefore, there isn't much expansion capacity. What is the source of power? Is it coming from fossil fuel? Is it coming from nuclear? Is it coming from renewable? This is especially important for colocation provider that they don't know who their end client is going to be or who their end tenant is going to be, whether it's going to be AWS, whether it's going to be Microsoft, OpenAI, Oracle, whoever, and they don't know that. So when they don't know that, they try to do everything to make their sites attractive to the end tenants, basically. What are the things that we can make it attractive? Say our facility is renewable, because all of those hyperscalers or all of those end tenants, they also have sustainability targets. They have net zero targets, they have carbon zero targets, whatever. And the other one, or the last one, is cost of power. How much is it going to cost for the data center owners or operator to bring power to the site, if there are going to be any power available in the grid? So if we want to do the site massing and determine how much power are we talking about, all right, we know the NVIDIA GB200 consumed that much power. We know the GB300 consumed that much power. So how do we determine how much power is needed? Are we going to have a gigawatt scale campus? Are we going to have megawatt scale, 100 of megawatt, couple of 100 megawatt? What are we talking about? So you need to answer these 4 questions to be able to work out how much would be the power consumptions of your site. The first one is the maximum planned IT load that you're going to have, taking into account the allowance for future growth and technology development. So do not cut it too fine, because you're going to regret it. Always allow for a little bit of uncertainty. We know the technology is evolving. We know the technology is, as you've seen in that graph, the GPUs are going to keep growing and growing, and therefore give yourself a little bit of buffer. The next one is, all right, so that's the IT part of it. Now, it's not finishing here, because we're going to need to cool that data center down. So you're going to have your maximum load associated with environmental control systems serving the data center spaces, taking into account the predicted external ambient temperature and humidity condition. This is basically your ASHRAE n equals 20 years as a minimum. Whenever you want to build a site, you need to look at ASHRAE database, find the closest weather station to your site, and it already has some design extreme ambient conditions. As a minimum, this was previously Uptime Institute minimum requirements. You need to consider and design for the worst case during the past 20 years. Because of global warming, because of climate change, because of all of those, and also the clients are now having a little bit lower risk appetite, most of our clients are already asking for n equals to 50. So we're looking at the past 50 years and then pick the worst case condition. Next one is any additional loads, any ancillary loads, front of house, back of house, lighting, security, BMS, you name it, they need to be added in. And last but not least, and one of the most important one that we usually pick up during peer review or this kind of stuff that some of the designers or electrical engineers, they usually forget, is that last item. And I'll call it non-discrete loads. The non-discrete loads, the first 3 are very simple because you can see them, you can sense them. They appear in your single line diagrams, in your schematics, and it's not easy to forget. You know that you have a chiller, that chiller consumes 1 megawatt of power, therefore you won't forget it. But the last one, which is the energy losses, That's your cable losses, your inverter inefficiencies, your transformer losses, your eddy current losses. Any energy loss that you have, the power or the energy needs to come from somewhere to be lost, right? So you need to allow for it in your capacity and sizing. The other point that I mentioned, which I'm not going to talk too much about it, is the power quality metrics. Different parts of the world, we have different standards that define what is an acceptable power quality in terms of the grid connection. Most of these in some of the countries, so the first one on the top, that's a European standard, EN 5160, which was published in 2000. Some of the countries in our region, in APAC region, are adopting that standard, and some of them are adopting the more of a US-based metrics. These metrics are called SAFE, KD, MAFE, and SAFE stands for Sustained Average Interruption Frequency Index. KD stands for Customer Average Interruption Duration Index, and MAFE stands for Momentary Average Interruption Frequency Index. Ignore the top two. MAFE is basically the main one that we need to look at it. MAFE says, how many times do we have power outages in a certain duration? Can be months, can be a year, can be 2 years. In a certain duration, how many outages did we had in that location? When we say how many outages, although it is called momentary average interruption, momentary definition in grid connection is different than the momentary interruption that we have in our data centers. In data centers, if you have an outage more than 10 milliseconds, 20 milliseconds, you're already out of the SEBIMA curve or ITIC curve zone. And that 10 millisecond, 20 millisecond can shut down your IT equipment, right? Whereas momentary definition from grid's perspective is somewhere between 2 to 5 minutes. So in 2 to 5 minutes, definitely we're out. We're long out. This is another example from EN 5160, which again shows you some criteria. I'm not going to go through them all. But you will see that it has a very, very wide range of interruption being allowed in the grid connection. For example, you'll see that the short interruption, it is allowed to have 10 to 100 times per year and still ticking the box say this is a good quality power, right? Which is totally unacceptable from our perspective, from our point of view in the data center industry. The other one is with the grid connection, this is kind of been evolving over the past few years that you know, we used to have data centers getting connected even at 400 volts when we had the facilities at around 1 megawatt, 2 megawatts. Still, even to date, with the edge facilities, when the facility is not too big, we can still get at 400 volt connection. It doesn't have to be medium voltage or high voltage. But speaking of AI, hyperscalers, and a bigger demand that we talked about earlier, then obviously you're going to need to go up in this ladder. The higher you go up in this ladder, the better quality power you're going to get. This is because at the 400 volt network, there are going to be so many other consumers consuming power and also injecting their abnormalities, their bad load, harmonics, and everything's back into the network. But the more you go up in this ladder, you're going to get a better power quality connections, obviously. Now, with microgrid, this is probably the most important slide of my slide deck, and I'm going to ask a couple of questions first. Again, today, we've heard from the first major panel. I'm 100% sure you're going to hear more and more and more about power being the bottleneck in the industry, power availability. Next one is sustainability. Next one is social license. Next one is bring your own power. And the answer to all of these problems are in this slide, right? That would basically solve all of these problems. we had a period of, especially in US or the countries that, they can go nuclear. They've already thought about it. They've already started, hiring, recruiting nuclear engineers. Even right now, if you go to your LinkedIn, just search Microsoft, Oracle, AWS, whoever, all the big, basically hyperscalers, US space, just search for nuclear. You'll see so many job ads, right? They're already thinking about it. But in our market, things like SMR, small modular reactor, nuclear fusion, these are all possible. And actually, it's a very good solution. If you leave the politics out of it, if you leave the other scary stuff out of it, it's a very good technology that can meet the demand in a very, very small scale. When I say small scale, I mean in terms of the nuclear generation, it's a small scale. But in countries like, for example, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, the rest of the countries that they're still not really in favor of a nuclear option, and they just want to heavily invest on the renewable power. So at the top, you'll see the traditional way, or still, that's what we're seeing still today. We have some power generation at usually regional location out of cities, out of residential places. It can be coal, it can be gas, it can be any type of power generation. Then it goes to basically transmission and distribution line because the power that is generated at the source, we can't transmit it for a very long distance. As I said, power generations are mostly out of cities. But data centers, because of the latency, they're usually in the cities. So one option was, which few developers have already looked at it, was to take their data centers closer to the power generation. That is also a good option. That is also possible. That, especially in Australia, it's already happening. The closed coal power stations that they're being decommissioned, the infrastructure is already there, and the data center owners and operators are looking at taking their facility to that location. That's a option. The second option is, instead of having all of those and then having around 35 to 45% fuel efficiency and losing so much energy just in the process of your distribution and transmission, how about we bring it back to the site, right? The difference between BYOP and microgrid are, I'm going to tell you about it, but they're completely different. With the BYOP, usually it's considered as behind-the-meter generation. A data center operator, owner, developer, they want to build a site. They reach out to the utility, say, I'm going to build 300 megawatt data center. Grid says, sorry, I don't have power. Bring your own power. Problem solved. The operator goes in, bring their reciprocating engine, gas turbine, whatever that is, fuel cells, whatever that fuel source is, and they'll bring it in behind the meter, no communication with the grid. They will have their own grid. But the idea is, with microgrid, instead of each data center have their own grid being disconnected from the macro grid, what if we communicate? What if we all talk, right? What are the things that we're going to have in the microgrid? You need generation, you need storage, you need loads, you need controller, and you need communication, which we already have all of these in a data centers, right? Even today, we still have it. This is your diesel generator, which all data centers have already. This is the storage. That's your battery inside your UPS, or even if you have one of those clients that have basically OCP client racks, they have in-rack battery storage, you still have that storage. Obviously, we don't have a problem with loads, right? That's your computing load. That's your AI loads. Controller, communication, we already have all of these, but we're not using them. It's just underutilized assets. Your diesel generators in business as usual, just sitting there doing nothing. 9 out of 10, 99% of the time, your diesel generators is just sitting there doing nothing, although you paid for it. You don't have much return on investment on it. And you'll see that as an insurance. You say that only if when the grid goes out, then I'm going to use my generators or during your site maintenance activities. That's the same thing with storage. The industry moved away a few years back from VRLA batteries to lithium-ion batteries. When I asked the question from a few developers that, why did you go to lithium-ion battery? One of the reasons was, which was common answer between them. They said that, oh, lithium-ion batteries have 4,000 cycling capacity, where VRLA has only 500 cycling capacity. What does a cycling capacity mean? Every time that you discharge your battery completely and you recharge it back up, that's one cycle. How many cycles do we have in today's data center? None, right? Because the grid is available. Even if the grid is going to be out, immediately we're going to call our generators. So the battery is only going to see your 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes battery autonomy time that you have in your site is only going to see 30 seconds of outage. That's not cycling. You're going from 100% in your battery to 90%, and you're recharging it back to 100. That's not cycling. But what if we actually do use that function of 4,000 cycles? Then how does it look like? If we use our UPS as a DER or dynamic energy resource, it's going to be possible. How is that going to be possible? Again, at the moment, data centers are just a consumer from the grid network. They consume power. I'm data center owner A. This is data center owner B. We're both consuming power from the grid. What if at the same time, when we are consuming power, we're also producing power to the grid? How is that going to be possible? Let me tell you something. Your grid operator can expect, based on the planning tools that they have or based on the monitoring tools that they have, they're going to tell you that on Wednesday, 8 p.m., we are expecting to see a very big peak demand. Whoever cuts 50 megawatts out of the grid, we're going to give you the rest of the week power for free, right? That's great. That's a good option. Rest of the week free, just because to just do a little bit of peak shaving, not a problem. What should I do? Your UPS needs to talk to the grid. The grid would send a signal, say, whoever goes out, take 50 megawatt out of grid, the first one who goes out, I'll give that incentive to you. Then that's part of the communication that we've seen in here, right? How do I go back? Yep, that's part of the controller and the communication. So the controller, your UPS most probably already have that built-in feature, but no one uses that feature. And the communication is obviously we're already communicating with the grid. We have SCADA, we have the fiber network, we have everything, so it's not a problem. The other solution would be using battery energy storage system or BESS. Again, by using the BESS, you can have that always-on nature of your site without causing any problem. The other problem that I wasn't planning to talk about it, but it just came to my mind, was in one of our new projects that I'm working on, we're lucky that we got power from the grid. We've got a massive power connection from the grid, and they've been only asking a few questions. How are you going to do your voltage write-through and fault write-through? Your IT load is protected by the UPS, great. Your UPS would look after that. What are you going to do with your cooling load? We're demanding you to put your cooling load also on UPS. And when I say cooling load, I'm not talking about CDUs or fan walls, I'm talking about chillers. They're asking to put the chillers on UPS. I'm like, are you out of your mind? What are you talking about? I can't put a massive chiller on UPS. And I said that then we're not going to give you power. Power is available, but you're going to cause disturbance into our network. So the answer to that question is BESS, right? If you have the BESS, all of those abnormalities, the grid operators is not going to see those, because the BESS is always in the middle. This is your load, this is the BESS, this is the grid. Whatever happens in here, the BESS is going to protect your site and also going to protect the grid. from blocking any abnormalities both ways. It's a bi-directional system. And that is the key. We want with the microgrid controls to have bi-directional UPS and or BESS to fix all of these problems. This one is demand-side response, which I've already mentioned. Things like peak shaving or whenever there is a momentary outage or there is something unexpected in the grid, but the grid would know in advance. They can send the signal out to all the providers and all the basically data centers that whoever goes out first, we're going to give you incentives and so on and so forth. Now, this is going to be in the bigger picture, where we have microgrid. I've seen some sites having the incentives and having the right mindsets of thinking about future generations, kids in the future, being responsible, doing the right thing, thinking about becoming green. But how can do that, right? I've seen sites that they say that, all right, we're going to install so many solar farms. Great. We're going to install so many wind turbines, on-site generation. Great. What are you going to do when solar is out? What are you going to do when there is no wind? Actually, the past couple of weeks in Sydney, there was like 3 weeks of rain. There was no sun. So what are you going to do with that, right? So that's the beauty of microgrid, that you can mix and match and blend different type of generation, loads, and control all together. What we have in here, at the top, you'll see, let me see if this pointer works in here. We have a wind turbine. Next right to it, we have the solar, we have the BESS. We have our UPS controls in here. We have fuel cells. We have our IT loads, critical loads. We have other non-super critical loads like, again, chillers and this kind of stuff as the facility loads. When there is wind, great, we're going to use it. When there is solar, great, we're going to use it. When there is not, we tap into the grid or we use our BESS. We use our storage energy, our stored energy that we have. Then this would give you that flexibility and you can become green, right? You don't need to wait 3 years, 4 years, 5 years till getting power from the grid. You can actually give back power to the grid. One of the other thing is when a data center is planned to be built, most of the time they don't know who their end client is going to be. If you guys remember, there was a couple of years ago, a few years ago, there was a massive pull-out of deal from Microsoft in the market, which caused so many of the projects either to be postponed or idled or to remain vacant for a couple of years. That already happened in the past. What if the same thing happens? What if you get power from the grid, you're asking for 500 megawatts, and whether you use it or not, you're going to still pay for it, right? So what are you going to do if you're not going to find a tenant? It's unlikely with current demand and with current boost in the AI market, it's unlikely, but it is possible, right? Again, if you have, instead of being a consumer, if you be a prosumer, then you can inject power back to the grid. You can sell your power back to the grid, right? All right, I think I've talked enough about microgrids. Let's have a quick look at some of the standards that we've been working on. Probably you're already familiar with them. Obviously, in Uptime Institute, it's not a standard. It's not really a corporate standard. It's a private company, but they've done a lot in forming the shape and the industry by their tier classification. After that, we had the TI 942 version A, version B, and version C, and the Big C 002, which both of these are ANSI standards, American National, basically standard institution. And then finally, we have ISO 22237. For the first time ever, we have an international standard on how to design data centers. which is driven by Senelec or EN5600, which was and still is a European standard, but ISO 22237 basically is very, very similar as it's written around that standards. Now, all of these standards, some of them are a little bit prescriptive, some of them are non-prescriptive, but at the end of the day, the aim of tier classification, availability classes, rating, type, those will define the level of redundancy and resilience in your site. Obviously, we have our N, which stands for need. That's why it's called N. This is our base minimum need that we have. After that, anything you add before or after that N, that means you're bringing redundancy. We have N+1, which can be one additional unit or pathway on top of the base requirements. That means if that equipment or that pathway fails or taken out for the maintenance, it's not going to affect the redundancy or the resilience of the system. We have 2N or N+N, which is the higher level of redundancy and resiliency. Again, gives you some level of fault tolerance feature. 2N+1, 2N+C, N+1/N. Probably that's the most common type of redundancy scheme that you would find in data center application. Commonly known as 4 to make 3, but it can be 3 to make 2, can be 6 to make 5. That's a way of doing redundancy. That's not the only way. That's a way of doing that, which I'll show you a little example after this. Now, we talked about 5 nines. 5 nines is actually a very interesting topic. I'm really interested about reliability and availability analysis that I've done both my bachelor and master's degree thesis on reliability analysis in data centers. I love this topic. There are two things that defines reliability and availability in your site. Mean time between failure and mean time to repair. How long is it going to take for something to break? And once it's broken, how long is it going to take to repair it or bring it back on? These two elements or these two metrics would allow you to do your reliability calculation. The first one, the mean time between failure, it's usually a calculated number. It's been tested. You would ask your UPS vendor, hey, this UPS, that's great. What's the MTBF of this UPS? They'll tell you it's 200,000 hours, 250,000 hours, 150,000 hours, right? And that number is being tested, usually by a third party in a test lab. They do so many things to simulate how long it's going to take for that particular thing to break. That's great. Next one is mean downtime or MTTR. Now, with MTTR, again, you ask your vendor, once this broken, how long is it going to take to fix this? And it said that, oh, it's a modular UPS. It only takes 2 minutes, right? And you would put that 150,000 hours, 250,000 hours, whatever the MTBF that your vendor gave you, and you would put that 2 minutes, 5 minutes again as the mean downtime or MTTR into the formula. You calculate your availability. Very simple. And then you get 5.9. Let me ask you this question. When your UPS is broken, is it really going to take you 2 minutes to fix this? Do you have the spare parts just right there? You have the technicians with all the tools and everything. Everyone's just ready, just waiting for something to break. And they say, oh, let's go, run, take this one out, put that next one back in, right? Even in Formula One, it takes more than that to, I don't know, change a tire or something, right? So you're not going to be able to do that in 2 minutes. Then all of your availability calculation, it's wrong because you ignore that fact. You can't rely on the MTTR or MDT value that your vendor gives you because it's not realistic. You need to put a realistic number. But how do we put a realistic number? How are we going to know how long it's going to take to repair it? Depends on what type of fault it is, depends of whether we have the spare part or not. We can't calculate it. And that is exactly the point, that playing with the MTTR is a game. If I get a client asking me, hey, can you do reliability calculation for me or availability calculation for me? I'm going to say, yes, I can, but don't do it. Even if you ask me to do it, I'll do it, but don't share the result with your end clients. Don't put it in your service level agreement, because if your client knows what reliability and availability is, they can sue you very easily, very easily. Don't agree and don't put it in your SLA targets, because I can find my way to say that you didn't do 5.9, especially when you play with the timeline. So if you look at a 10 years timeline and you have 1 hour of outage, that's 5.9. If you look at in 1 month, 30 seconds outage is 5.9s. That's a facility that fails once a month for 30 seconds. This is a facility that fails every day for 1 second, and still it's 5.9s, right? So 5.9s is not as good as it sounds. You need to look at it in context. You need to look at to see what time frame are we talking about, how many failures are we talking about, not just the availability percentage. This is the example of again, a way of doing redundancy. What you see on the left-hand side is block redundancy or catcher redundancy. Our UPS 1 and 2 or the entire system, these are basically loaded up to 100% in business as usual. And then we have that R over there, which stands for reserve. Some people calling it catcher. And in business as usual, that's just sitting there doing nothing. When we wanted to do any maintenance or a failure or something, then that redundant or reserve UPS and the entire system will get loaded up and will serve the load. The other way of doing that is distributed redundancy. This is a 3 to make 2 arrangement. You see, we have 3 of the entire system. We have the generator, transformers, UPS, distribution, all the way to the load, and the second one and the third one. At any point in time, you can take one of these out, either intentionally or unintentionally, to do your maintenance. Or due to a failover, and it's not going to impact your load. That's why it's called distributed redundancy. So you still have your N+1, but you're doing it that way. Which one is better? Which one is worse? None of them are better or worse than the other ones. Different clients have different style of doing things. Different end clients would prefer different style of redundancies. And again, they're both great, right? With this one, you can hit almost 100% utilization because your UPS 1 and 2 in business as usual are going to be utilized to 100%, although your reserve is going to remain at 0% in business as usual. With a distributed redundancy, when you have 3 of them, 3 to make 2 arrangement, in business as usual, you're going to hit 66.6% utilization across all of them. So you might find the other one a little bit maybe more energy efficient than this one, because this one has the reserve sitting there doing nothing. But again, they're both great. They're both doing the same job. ISO 22237 would define different types of power distribution that we can have in a site. Right at the top, we have the unprotected socket. That is basically your, the unprotected socket is basically your general purpose cleaners outlet, things like that they're not important. If you lose them, you lose them. No one's going to complain. You didn't breach any SLA. Nothing happens. Next one, we have the protected socket. This is basically our IT load, or sometimes even your fan bolts, CDUs, if you have continuous cooling, which is protected by this UPS or DC supply. It goes to a secondary distribution equipment, things like PDU as an example. or it could be busway, goes into a tertiary distribution equipment, and then feeds to your rack. The other one is locally protected socket. You will find some data centers and some end clients, they don't like to have centralized UPS. And they don't install centralized UPS. They say that we're going to have our battery backup inside our own rack. And then this is basically that. You have a local battery supply or UPS at the final load, and this is your locally protected socket. And the last one, short break socket, is technically generator backed, but not UPS backed. So things like in normal operation, you would put your chillers in here. Your chiller is fine. It can experience 30-second outage while you're waiting for your generators to kick in and carry the load. You have hopefully a buffer tank that can, your pump is UPS backed. You have buffer tank. Nothing's going to happen in that 30-second. Grid, basically, you have a fault. Your generator would kick in and carry the load. And finally, I wanted to show the difference between traditional distribution in the data hall versus busway distribution. With the PDU distribution, this was really a traditional or legacy way of distribution where everything was pre-wired. All the miniature circuit breakers were at the PDU level, and usually at the enterprise facility, you would see that. But if it's a colocation, if it's a hyperscale site, especially in a multi-tenant environment, let's say this is client A, this is client B. Now, if this client B say, hey, I'm using 6 kilowatt rack, can I please switch to 10 kilowatt rack? Can I switch to 20 kilowatt rack? What's going to happen is this PDU needs to be shut down. This cable needs to be pulled back, the breaker in here to be changed if you have the capacity, then also affect the other client that has nothing to do with this one. Whereas with the busway distribution, you have the top-off boxes just right on top of the racks, plug and play. You don't need to impact any of the other clients or racks, and very clean, very neat. No need for those cabling, rerouting the cablings, which we've seen, especially back in the days when we have raised floor in data centers. They always used to blocking the air with the downflow cooling system and so many other things. So that's why the industry moved away from that type of distribution to busway distribution. And my last slide is about data center efficiency. Or how should I say, is it even right to say efficiency? Because if you remember the formula, which is just right there, efficiency means output divided by the input. So, and we're talking about energy efficiency. What is the energy input to the data center? Electricity, diesel, water, solar gain. 100% energy goes in. What comes out is still 100% energy, 100% waste heat. So it is 100% efficient as a heater, right? That's why we don't use the keyword of efficiency. That is the reason that we say power usage effectiveness, because data centers are 100% energy efficient, but they're not effective. And by looking at the power usage effectiveness, then we can see how much of that power that goes in actually does the digital service. And it's not a power metric. PUE is an energy metric, so you need to annualize it. It needs to include all seasons, because obviously in colder season, you're gonna consume less power for the cooling system. In hotter seasons, you're gonna consume more power for the cooling system. So that's why it has to be annualized. And the other metrics such as water usage effectiveness, carbon usage effectiveness, and so on and so forth, that we should always look at usage effectiveness. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the session. Feel free to scan the QR code if you want to learn more, or if you're interested to attend one of our sessions. We'll be grateful to have you. Thank you so much, everyone.